ilge drolor zambe zeparche bande lame shabla solvade. Om Guru Vajradhara Suma Timunisha Sane Karma Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Suma Timunisha Uta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Om Guru Vajradhara Suma Timunisha Sane Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum. Pakyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Makyuke Kudan Dagi Alu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tugdan Dagi Yi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Olo. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Sashipu ki choshi meto Tramare ravalingshi Nide gempadi Sangye shintu Mikde ulwarki Drokunu namanda shingla Chöpar shoyidam guru ratna mindrala kam niryatayami Sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi Dagi jinso gibe sonam ki Drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi Dagi jinso gibe sonam ki Drola pinchira sangye drupar sho sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki sangye drupar sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Namo ya lai ke da lu da nu jin ke rubu dan da mi ke nam da Drawa kun ge janama chi tsampa tamche ke do da ge che te
Good morning. I'd like to start today with an image. Let's let's imagine an object that is balanced. I leave you to your own creativity, but imagine something that that there's also something long. Imagine this object that is long and that is balanced on something. And on one side, we have a part that represents our body, our physical state of being. And on the other side, we have our environment where we live. Not just if it's hot or cold, but it has to do with the people around us, the situations that we are living, everything that surrounds us. And in the middle is that balanced point, which is our our psychophysical being. This is that point where it's resting, the resting point. And here's the important question. That first point, our body. How much does that influence our state of balance? When it's balanced, it means we're fine. We have that inner state of well-being, where we don't want anything to be different from what it is. And I see the body, I see it as something that has an enormous importance, because no matter how happy one is for many other things, but once one has a sickness or has pain and the body is not balanced, the hormones are up and down, whatever it is, that we lose our balance, don't we? If someone that's in pain or in a state of great fatigue, anything that happens in our body, inevitably, it has an effect over our whole, and especially on our mind. And from my point of view, body and mind are two manifestations of the same thing, making this one entity, which is our psychophysical reality, that you can never separate. Anything that happens in the body has its equivalent or this correspondence in the mind, and whatever happens in the mind has the corresponding feelings in the body. But when we look at our body and how do we move, how do we eat, how do we sleep, in what phase are we in our body? I remember once I was in the mountains on Monte Rosa Mount Rosa, and I was coming down. It was difficult to come down. I was with my mom too, and at a certain point, um, adolescents came by, and they came they came down jumping, and they were incredibly speedy. I thought it was even dangerous. And my mother said, "You see, up to 21, our our brain is not fully developed, and one of the parts, the one of the last parts of our brain to develop is the part that can foresee danger, which is good because if a child could see dangers right away, would never would would stay blocked. He would never allow himself to experience new things. And as a young child, you don't have an idea of possible danger, and so one jumps, one runs, one experiences the world, and learns. And so, according to our age and the physical age of our body, we we live according to the physical age of our body. We live our body and we live our reality differently. A child compared to an adolescent, compared to middle-aged person, an older person, whatever happens in the body has an enormous impact on our inner state of being. Just to say that our body is important. And generally speaking, we live in a culture where we give a lot of importance to our body. A time we want to eat healthy, go to the gym, do exercises. But, but how much we really know how to take care of our body is another topic. I was talking to these kids who came for the winter camp, and talking to them, I said, now they were 15 to 17, 14 to 17 years old. And I asked them, so when one is very young, one is taken care of by their parents, and the parents decide what they should eat and where they should go. But now you're taking care of yourselves, but no one's given you a book, a manual. Then we don't say, okay, now the body works like this. You need to be careful because if you use it badly, this could happen, that could happen. We don't have this. We have. It becomes, we live the day. We follow certain, it becomes automatic. But when we talk about our physical state of being, I think that most of us, we don't have really a correct awareness about what we need to have a healthy body, and we give priority to what's more comfortable, what is more enjoyable. And this is one of our weaknesses that we have. But when we talk about our body in general, we have this tendency, we have this awareness that we should take care of our body, and we give it a tremendous amount of importance. But on the other side, we have our environment. For that state of balance, how important are our surroundings? To say, if physically we're well, but there's someone next to us who's very aggressive or isn't well, or has a difficult economic situation or whatever it is, does that take away our state of balance? Are we influenced by that? And I don't want to say that our surroundings is not important. Our environment, traditionally, according to Buddhism, our surroundings would be called external conditions. And it's very important. And it's up to us as we go on to find more and more how to find a way to relate to people around me, or to live in a healthy environment. If do I live in a polluted or a healthy place, a clean place? Does that make a difference? And when I'm talking about pollution, it's not just about in the air, but it can be for food. There's acoustic pollution, noise pollution. When I talk about this, I always remember, just by chance, I was in São Paulo in Brazil, and it was the day where they had implemented a law in the city of São Paulo where they prohibited all the great billboards, outdoor billboards. And before, the city was it was a tapestry of billboards, and from one day to the next, they took them all down. And I I was, the day before, you see them, you're used to it, and the next day they're not there. And that feeling, well, there was a feeling of space. The mind was more relaxed because everything you see takes up space within. We're not indifferent to what we see towards our sensory objects. There's a study, it's very interesting, that talks about subliminal messaging. I don't know if you've ever seen anything on subliminal messaging. This is an old study. They took the beginning of advertisement, for example. They understood that if they took one, so on TV, every 1 second is made up about 30 frames. And they saw that if they added a frame, if they added a message to one of those frames, if they wrote a message and then leave frames without and then added another one, so in 1 second, 30 frames, maybe that message is seen 4 times, not seen because the eyes are not able to perceive it. But what's interesting is when they show the video with these subliminal messages, these hidden messages, the person after the video, if you ask them, even if they didn't remember or they didn't have the awareness of reading that message, they knew that they had read. I mean, they received that message. Remember that film of Stanley Kubrick, who is sitting on an electric chair, and the scene is not that strong, but the emotion that come with it is stronger because they overlapped the image of that man with a skeleton. So we see it, but we don't know that we're seeing it because this subliminal messaging with the same technique where they add this image, for just a frame or two. So if I'm not even able to recognize that I'm seeing something, but it affects me. Well, what can we say about what I can actually see and actually read and actually hear? So of course it affects us. Of course, we know that subliminal messaging was then prohibited, but the point is that what we see, it influences us. It takes up space. Everything we see, everything we hear, the smells that we smell, the places we go, all the objects that we enter into contact with our 5 senses, our surroundings, leaves an imprint. It has an effect on us, whether we want it or not. There's been research. It's good that they did research. The result is quite obvious. And the question was, playing violent video games for a certain number of hours a day, does that increase one's tendency to be violent? Yes, because what I imagine has power over me. So it has an effect. So our surroundings, the people that we interact with, the places where we are, places we go, and this all has an impact on us. So we need to take care not only of our body in the best way possible, but at the same time we need to take care of our surroundings. Try to the best of our ability to live in a healthy context from the point of view of relationships, of environment. What happens when someone has a healthy body, has a context that is healthy enough? I mean, perfect I've never seen, but let's say healthy enough, well enough. But let's say that the person mentally is suffering. I mean, first of all, can this happen? Yes or no? Yes, I've already seen this many times, that people that physically were well, some are strong as a bull, and in their surroundings, they're fine. They're materially speaking, they lack nothing. The people around them, their environment is well enough. Let's say healthy enough. But emotionally, mentally, this person maybe is not well. Then what happens when our surroundings are good or positive, and our body is fine, but our mind is imbalanced? Can we maintain? Can we maintain this balance? You know, so that balance, as we were talking before, when one is out of balance, that that it doesn't stay balanced at all. It goes down. On the other hand, if the mind is well, happy and stable, even if someone physically is not well, or even in the surroundings are difficult, one can maintain their balance more or less. Let's say having a healthy body and a healthy environment with a sick mind is like being in heaven and living hell. On the other hand, having a healthy mind in a body that is sick and in an unhealthy surroundings, let's say, it's like living in hell, but like being in hell, but living it as it were heaven. Ideally, all three are healthy, but our task in our lives mostly is to try to have a healthy life and maintain this balance among the parts. It's not easy, it's not obvious, but it's possible. And as we live, what happens is every word that we say, every thought that we have, every choice that we make, every place we go, every interaction that we have in our lives, external or internal, our body, speech, and mind, gradually shapes our existence and increases our state of balance or imbalance. I could say that one of our greatest objectives that I think that we all have, and I imagine that we all share, is to have a healthy life, to be physically healthy, also to live in a healthy environment and to have a healthy mind. My job today is not to talk about how we can take care of our body, also because I'm not the best one to do that. From the point of view of surroundings, I could say something, but that's not my point either. Today we'll look at our mind, the aspect of our mind, also because according to Tibetan teachings, the body is given importance, our surroundings are important, but the mind is instrumental. Our mind is made of different aspects. First of all, why should we look at our mind? Because it's the most powerful tool that we have to make us suffer or to keep us happy or make us happy. The mind is able to have us live something as something beautiful, see it as something beautiful, or see it as something terrible. Someone who is in a strong state of mental malaise can really be living hell. like someone who mentally is fine, even if living an apparently difficult situation, one is able to maintain his balance. I saw my master Lama Michel Rinpoche, even if he lived very difficult situations. It's not that that Rinpoche always had an easy life. Different situations that I saw myself where that he had to live, that he had to face, and for most of us, we would still be crying about it, let's say, because they were really difficult without getting into details. And what I saw is that it's not that he enjoyed those difficult situations, but I never saw him lose his his joy or his balance, his peace. I saw that he always maintained that, and also his healthy and positive principles. And I've had the good luck to see others similar to Lama Ganchen Rinpoche, um, who who were able to maintain this peace and joy even in front of difficult situations. And I've seen other people, even if things were going well, they were upset. They were suffering. So I'd like to look at this dynamic because our mind is the most powerful tool that we have, even on a material point of view. The most powerful resource to have wealth, to be successful at work or for a career or to make money, do you have to be born with a great inheritance, or do you need these mental abilities, to the main condition for success, even on a material level, for work or whatever it is not really our physical state of being. Think about Stephen Hawkins, for goodness sake. I mean, physically, he wasn't very well, but was one of the he was one of the most successful scientists ever, who had many discoveries related to black holes, other things. I think about also, even someone who had an incredible determination about a sick body and created the system that we know as Pilates, Joseph Pilates. He, as a child, he had rickets, and always had the fever. He was always sick and weak, but he became fixated with the idea that he wanted to become an athlete. And his father had a gym, and he would let him stay there, kind of pretending, because they knew that he was very skinny and sick, always with a fever, and he knew he would never become an athlete. But instead, Joseph Pilates, he trained harder than everyone else, and at the end, not only did he become an athlete, but he cured himself with the techniques that he developed, and he created a system to help others, without getting into other details about his life. But what was his main resource that allowed him to do what he did? His mind, his determination, his will. Not because he was already favored by a healthy, strong body. So we see that our mind is incredibly powerful for all of this. And our mind has an important characteristic, similar or the same actually to all other things like the body and our environment. The mind is recently, scientifically, it's called this plasticity of the mind. And using other terms, we would say it's the fact that our mind and everything else is in constant transformation. In Tibetan, it's said, kechi kechi chikikba. Kechik, kechik, chikik, chikikba. Kechik, kechik. Kechik means instant. Kechik, kechik, from instant to instant. Ki, it just shows that there's an action, there's a verb. Echikba means transformation. So that what is transformed from instant to instant. So every instant brings transformation. What does this mean? That every moment is in movement and transformation, but the transformation comes according to the interaction. So let's start from this principle that wherever there's interaction, inevitably there will be transformation. It's not possible for there to be interaction without transformation, and a transformation can't come about without an interaction. So our mind it interacts constantly. Every thought, every sensory object that we perceive. Our mind is always moving from instant to instant. It interacts and it transforms. The way that it transforms depends on the interaction. Just look, even from a physical point of view, an exercise that at the beginning is difficult. Once it's repeated with a certain constancy, after a while it becomes easier. Just look what about looking at reading or learning a musical instrument, playing a musical instrument. It's a muscle that you repeat that experience, and little by little it becomes easier and easier, more and more natural. But what happens is it depends on how I move that muscle. If I sit always slouched over, hunched over, it's maybe at the beginning it's difficult to sit like this, but if every day I sit like that, my body's going to get used to it, and then it becomes difficult to sit up straight. So if I always sit up straight, then I will get used to sitting up straight. So we have this marvelous ability to adapt. But this ability to adapt, we can adapt to good things and bad things. So if I go somewhere where there's a lot of pollution in the air, and I come from a place without air pollution, then at first I smell it a lot, the smell in the air, and my body reacts badly. After a while, actually quite quickly, the body can adapt to the point where we're not bothered by that pollution, which doesn't mean that that pollution over time is not damaging us, but we adapt somehow. We get used to it. One question I ask myself, I think it's important. I I don't have I don't have a choice whether I'm going to transform or not. My body, my surroundings, my body, my being and all of its aspects is always in transformation. So I don't have this choice of whether to transform or not, but I do have the choice whether I want to transform myself, if I want to shape myself with awareness, with or without awareness as a reaction to everything I live. So I try to live as a reaction, and I try to avoid suffering and obtain pleasures and survive comfortably. Or do I try to shape myself, transform myself in the direction that I want to I want to go in? Because if we try to shape ourselves in the direction we want to go, it's not necessarily easy. For example, someone who does a knee surgery and then needs physiotherapy to start walking again. Luckily, it's never happened to me. I've seen other people. How pleasurable is that physiotherapy? Has anyone here done that? It's incredibly pleasurable, right? Every session, you think, oh, what joy. No, it's incredibly painful. Every 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 extra centimeter that you need to move, for that mobility of your knee is incredibly painful. But why are you doing it? You're doing it because you want to go back to walking. So you have the awareness that by doing this, even though it's difficult, it will take me to avoid another suffering. And like it's happened. I've done some certain massages, some treatments that are painful, but I consider it a positive pain because it'll help me be better afterwards. But and I'm not saying that for something to be good for us, it needs to be painful. But when we want to shape ourselves, we set an objective, a direction with awareness. We imagine our future, how we want to be, and we interact accordingly. Economically, for example, I want to be able to save this amount of money. Because I want to buy that house. I have this image, and then gradually I work for that. I put money aside. I try to earn more, spend less. So, generally speaking, in our lives, there's this there's first fork in the road. Let's say I can try to survive comfortably. The problems and difficulties at the moment, I try to resolve them. I try to avoid physical, mental sufferings. When I see that I can have more pleasure, I try to get more pleasure, and life goes on. And this is one way, a possible way. And we live a little bit like the victim of the world. I'm like this because that is like this and that is like that. Okay, do you follow? And the other choice is where I say, I have something, even if it's small, and it's called free will. We have freedom of choice and action. We're not totally conditioned without freedom, even if our freedom is small. For example, when we're in a situation, we face a situation, are we free from our past? From the choices we've made in the past? No. Are we free? Are we free from the experiences that that give us the filter of how we see our present? So we are conditioned by our past experiences and our past actions. We're also conditioned by the conditions of others, those around us, by our body. In this present moment, I can't choose something that my body doesn't allow me to do because I'm conditioned also by my physical state of being. So at the end of the day, we don't have that much freedom without getting into too many details. But within all of that, in a situation, I have this feeling that's really quite strong. I have this conviction that I have this freedom to say, not say, go, not go, do not go within me, within me. And we have this certain freedom, and that's where there's enormous, enormous power. But this becomes important when we're able, first of all, to have this awareness that we can choose a direction and we have chosen a direction. And the main objective that I set today is to have a healthy mind, have a balanced mind, to live our life with satisfaction and joy and balance. This is something that for me, and I've understood more. I don't know why, but the first time I came to Albagnano, and at the time I was living in India, maybe it was 1999 or 2000, at the very, very beginning of the center. and I don't know why in that moment I was in the car. Francesco and Gabriella, who had come to pick me up at the airport, and it was nighttime. It was raining, and Francesco said, "We'll go along the lake, even if it's dark and raining." Um, and I was thinking, "Oh no, why the lakeside? Maybe we'll go another day in the sunshine. Now I'm so tired, I just want to go home." Just to say that it wasn't any kind of mystical moment. And it's interesting that very often our insights, we understand deep things when it's really unexpected. And so this thought came to me in that moment. Problems exist and they will always exist. Because the rule is a problem ends and then another one starts. And what happens when a problem finishes and we don't find another one? we can we create one. This is common rule. We can go into details as to why and why, but not now. But when I understood in that moment problems exist and they will always exist, this I felt a great relief. I thought, oh, how wonderful. I mean, really wonderful. That feeling of how wonderful, because I understood that up until that moment, I was living my life trying to resolve problems, thinking that once I've resolved this, everything would be fine. When I resolve that problem, this will all be fine. And then what happens with that? Everything's fine. That doesn't happen because there's something else. And the message I gave myself was I can't condition my inner state of being, whether I'm happy or not. I can't condition my happiness based on external conditions, because if it's like that, then I'm trapped. Because to be well, if to be well, that depends on external conditions, that's just never going to happen. And when it's not the health, we have economic problems. And if we don't have economic problems, relationship problems. I mean, there's always something. Um, Living among so many people, I see when one is happy, the other one is jealous. When one is calm, then the other one is sick. I mean, there's just always something. I mean, this is life. So from that moment, I set the following objective, which is I want to be in harmony with myself and others. I want to be well. I want to be well with myself and others, independently of where I am, with whom I find myself, and regardless of the situation I find myself in. I can't condition my state of well-being and peace, joy, and balance based on, my surroundings, my external surroundings, where I am, with whom I am, in the situation I'm finding myself. Um, so this helps me really walk in a healthy direction. And I haven't reached this objective, but I'm really quite proud of the steps I've taken. So how can we find this balance? What characteristics can we develop to maintain this state of balance independently of our external conditions? And the answer, I can't say do like this and everything will be fine, but I have some advice that will be greatly helpful. One life philosophy that was quite similar were the ancient Greek Stoics, and there's a very beautiful. Um, there's there's one there's one it's manual, the manual of, okay, two people have read this. It was really beautiful. It's called the manual Epictetus. And the version I have has a commentary. So you that at least that first part is really useful. I don't remember the this is written in a text written, 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. I have to paraphrase. It says that things are of two types. There are things that depend on us, and there are things that don't depend on us. What depends on us? Our mental state of being, our choices, our actions, our values, our principles. These all depend on us. What doesn't depend on us, what other people do, the situation we find ourselves in, he adds also a body and everything that surrounds us. And the text goes on saying suffering comes from trying to have control over what doesn't depend on us and letting go of control of what depends on us. And happiness can be found on having control of what depends on us and not trying to have control over what doesn't depend on us. And the original text is much more beautiful than how I've paraphrased it. And this is that first page. So try to read it and decide if you want to go on or not. But it was very useful. So there are different aspects in our lives where we can try to find this balance. And Buddhism has these tools, these aspects. And today I'd like to share some. First of all, this path of transformation, this awareness of transformation. For example, if someone asks you, what do you do? What do you do in life? We understand what do you do as a job, right? We have this social system where our main activity in our life after school, we study to become, our studies are all set up so that we can work well. Why do children need to be seated 8 hours at a desk, at school? Because then later in life, they'll never be able to sit in an office for 8 years. Take a child who was raised in the fields or in the forest, in the jungle. Try to sit that child down for 8 hours in a box with recycled air. It wouldn't be possible. But as children, we train in doing what then adults do at work. Nothing against work. We work. We work hard, and we earn, and we pay taxes, etc., etc. But if someone asks you, what do you do? Let's try to give an answer that goes beyond our work. For example, what do I do? What I do, I put a lot of effort to find a greater balance. That's what I do in my life. I'm training physically and mentally because I want to find greater balance. I want to love myself better. I want to love others. I want to have a view of reality that corresponds to how it is, a correct view of reality. Let's try to give an objective that goes beyond work and family, material things, and nothing against any of that. But there is something else and it's not what I want to do, but it's more about who do I want to be. So the first part of the objective is, who do I want to be? Do I want to be a balanced person, satisfied? Do I want to be someone who has concentration, awareness, correct discernment? Is someone who's peaceful? I don't want to be someone who's nervous, anxious, sad, dissatisfied, violent. So we ask ourselves who we want to be. And in front of this, we get to work. And from the point of view of what's inside, there are three important parts. three fundamental parts in Buddhism, and it transcends Buddhism and all all systems, religious and non. These are the worldview. Worldview. So the first is worldview. It's how we see reality. They're filters through which we perceive the world. It's where we have the answer to what is joy, what is suffering, what makes me happy, what makes me suffer, what's life, what's death, what happens after death. I mean, many questions are answered by this world view that we have. I mean, we have our own view. The second aspect is our conduct, our lifestyle. How do we live our everyday life? How do we eat? How do we interact? How do we behave related to money, to other people, sexually? I mean, this is all of our interactions, our lifestyle. And the last one, it's the last, let's say it's the least important when we're at the beginning, and it's the most important when we're further along. It's called meditation, but I think a better translation would be techniques of familiarization, the things that we do to shape ourselves into what we want to be, but we are not yet. So what Buddha did, from my point of view, he shared with us his worldview, gave us instruments of conduct and also instruments, tools for familiarization. So without getting into too many details, let's see these. I mean, we could spend days on end for each one of these, but the first one, and then if we see that it corresponds, if we see if it looks coherent to us, we can try to apply it. We can choose to apply it or not. So let's start with the first one. The view is divided into four fundamental points, many different ways that we could look at this in many different ways, and we won't go into too many details. These are called the four seals, like four stamps, seals. So if for something to be authentic, it needs to have these four seals. We also have, like, quality seals. We buy things. There's certifications, let's say. Is it organic? It depends on the whether it's certified or not. So here, there's four necessary certifications to see if it's part of Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist teachings or not. Duce tamche mitakpa is the first one. Everything that is all composed phenomena are impermanent. What does that mean? You can see me, right? Look at me well. Now just close your eyes for a minute, for a moment. Open your eyes again and look at me again. Has my beard grown? Without philosophizing, without no, practically, in direct way. Have you Have you perceived my beard to have grown? And your hair hasn't grown either. But then if you ask yourself, does a beard grow from one instant to another? Eh, if we philosophize a little bit, we think about it. Um, if it, my beard has grown, how much has it grown? And once I read this, it hair in general grow 5 a second or something like that. What that means, actually, I have no idea. I think a nanomillimeter is a millimeter divided by a million. I don't know. But what happens is our hair, my beard, they're constantly growing. But when we see it, it seems like it's always the same. Now let's go a little bit deeper. We see a person, we say hello, we meet them, and then we go to meet them a week later. And do we think that we are going to meet that same person that week later or somebody different? We come to the center, we come back a month later. Do we think we're going to find the same place or a different place? I think that you left from your house to come here. Now, when you go home today, what house are you expecting to find? Well, it depends on who you left at home. But certain aspects, let's say, of the house that should be the same. What happens is, if we analyze, is it possible to meet the same identical person a week later? Everything that interacts inevitably transforms, it changes, and a person transforms in so many different ways. 5 senses, the 6th sense of the mind, is in constant transformation, and these transformations naturally bring interactions naturally bring transformation. So even if the person is chikpa and in constant transformation, is impermanent, in other words, appears to us as if he or she were permanent. Even when we look in the face, that we see our hair, the beard is in constant transformation, it appears to us as if it were static and permanent. And what do we do in front of this appearance of permanence? Do we say, oh no, it's just optical illusion, it's not like this? Or do we relate to that reality as if it were permanent? An example is a little bit less here when we walk in the mountains, but imagine that you're in a plane. Does the earth appear to you as being flat or round? How does it appear to us? It appears flat, and how do we relate to the earth? As if it were flat or round. We walk, and it always seems flat. We don't think at a moment it's going to start curving down, because the measure between us and the earth, in our own perspective, I mean, if we were tall, like 1,000 times taller than what we are, if we were as tall as, 1,000 kilometers tall, we wouldn't have the sensation. If we were like little prince, we would, on his little planet, we would see that we live in a round planet. And similar to that, reality is impermanent, but our brain, our mind cannot perceive very, very short periods of time. We can't see that change that happens so quickly. And according to ancient Buddhist teachings, it's said that the shortest time that a person can perceive, take 4 seconds and divide it into 60. Every 4 seconds would be one breath. And and then the breath, this 4, is divided by 67 parts. And that would be a moment. And this moment, it would be the shortest moment that one can perceive, according to Buddhist teachings. But so what happens in that very, very brief space? We're not able to see the changes, and without getting into details, the impermanent reality appears to us as being permanent, and we relate to this appearance as if it were real. So we're upset when we see change. We expect things to be always the same. And this happens for another reason too. When we relate with something for a person, we see a person, and seeing that person, there are images, forms, the touch, the voice. We create a mental image of that person. And we say, this person is like this. Devadatta, let's say Devadatta is like this. You think of a person, you have an image. That person is in constant transformation, but our mental image isn't. When we meet that person again, we think that mental image that we created is still there. I don't know if that's clear. In other words, we relate mostly, we relate more to mental images than to the person. And when the person doesn't correspond to that mental image that we created, whose fault is it? Of course, it's that person's. You are not the way you should be. We don't say, okay, I need to update my mental image that I've created. So what happens is we relate to impermanent reality through mental images that are permanent, that is not in constant transformation. So impermanent reality appears as if it were permanent, and we relate to it as such. Together with this, I mean, what does this bring as a consequence? Our difficulty in accepting change, our difficulty in even on a course level, like getting older. What's wrong with getting older? I just really don't understand. Oh, may I have people pray for a long life, but then they don't want to be old. I don't understand. What's the choice do we have to not get old? Anti-wrinkle cream aside. I mean, the only solution would be to die young. There's no alternative. So it's not, getting old is not a problem. The problem is not taking care of our body, and as we become old, and all the consequences. I used that car badly, and my wheels and I used the wrong oil and fuel, etc. So my knees and my liver, etc. I used it badly. So there's another consequence that's a little harder to see. The fact that I mean things are in constant transformation because they interact. If there were no interaction, there would be no change. And the greater the interaction, the greater the change. If you have food at home and you want it to change very little, what do? You put it in the refrigerator because you diminish the interactions so that there's less change. So what happens is impermanence brings naturally for every interaction to bring a transformation. So things don't just happen like this. They come through this process of constant interaction and change. So when when we see things as being permanent, we lose contact with that natural process of interaction that brings transformation. We're detached. And we add this to times that in which we live today, where we want everything right away, or we want things automatically, and we lose contact with nature, and this gradual process of things. If we want to eat a good salad, how much time do you need? Do you plant the seeds and wait? You need time. Does it take a day? I think at least 3 weeks. I am not sure. I'm not expert. I've actually never planted salad, but whatever it is, I mean, nature shows us there's a cause. You have to take care of it, and little by little, the result comes. Instead, we go, I don't even go to the store anymore. I just pick up my cell phone and I buy it as if there were nothing behind it. And we lose contact with this gradual process of things. And the strange thing is we do the same thing with ourselves. We want to be in a certain way without the process of becoming that thing. I don't know if that's true, if that's clear. So impermanence shows that every small action, every small interaction brings a transformation. And this shows us that every small interaction is very powerful. And every time I think about this, I think about a story that really touched me when I thought about it. When we think about reflecting on this present moment, try to tell the story of this exact moment. How many things needed to happen for this moment to be as it is? It's starting from everyone's life. How many things, even apparently banal, how many of these things, if they hadn't happened, would keep this moment from being this moment? Obviously, if Lama Michel Rinpoche, who founded the center, I mean, if he hadn't come here, we wouldn't be here. He was born in Tibet. He left Tibet in 1963 for India, and in the 1970s, he met someone, and he had this vision that he needed to establish a place with 5 mountains surrounded by a forest and a lake in front of him. And he looked for that for years and years. The first one he found, it was maybe towards the end of the 70s. And it was in the south of India, near where I lived, in camp number 2 of the refugees, where there was there's a small little hill and an artificial lake. And he said, okay, well, dreams and visions, you can't always take them so literally. And he wanted to stay there. He made a small retreat house, and he was going to do a year's retreat there. So he made this kind of box for meditation, because you don't actually sleep during meditation. And so he prepared everything, and so he went to a friend of his who also became one of my teachers, Gen Lakpala, and he said, I'm going to do this 1-year retreat. And Gen Lakpala, who's a man of few words, he said, if I were you, I wouldn't I wouldn't be able to recite 100 mantras. And he asked, why? What's wrong with this plan? And again, Lakpala said, with all the debts that you have, people don't have the courage to go to you to ask for money back because you're a lama and they have great respect for you. But knowing that I'm your friend, they come to me. And I'm tired. Always coming to you. So I don't even tell you half of it. I know that you don't have the money to give back. But with all the debts you have, I wouldn't be able to recite 100 mantras. Why did Lama Ganchen have so many debts? He would go around doing healing and giving advice. Traditionally, in the Tibetan culture, you don't invite a master to your house if you don't have something to offer. And at the time, there was a tremendous amount of poverty, and people were ashamed to invite him. So if he needed to go to one house, he would leave early, and he would stop at all the houses on the way, pretending, oh, he needed, he was just passing by, and I mean, these people they didn't have money to eat, so he would go to the houses. He would go to the houses of the people who trusted him and had faith in him, and he would ask for loans, and he would take that money and give it to the people in need. He was kind of like a, a Robin Hood, but he wasn't stealing. He was borrowing. I mean, he was also known as the Lama of the poor. And at a certain point, again, Lakbala said this, if I were you, I wouldn't be able to do 100 mantras. And it's said that Lama Ganchen, who was enthusiastic about starting this retreat, he was upset about that, and so he didn't do he decided to not do the retreat, and instead he accepted an invitation to go to Sikkim, who is the king of Sikkim invited him to Sikkim, which is the north of India, to heal the mother of the king, who had eye problems. And he thought, okay, I'll go there for a few months, and with the offerings that I receive for this, then I'll come back and I'll pay all my debts. So he went there. He was able to heal the mother of the king, and his room opened into a kind of terrace, and people were there from sunrise, and the 3 months turned into 3 years. He received offerings, he paid back all of his loans, and he was in close to Nepal. It's an important family. It's Setin Gyurme. And Setin Gyurme's mother knew Lama Ganchen even from a previous life, and invited Lama Ganchen to Nepal for Losar, for Tibetan New Year. And there weren't monasteries or anything in Kathmandu, so they took the carpet showroom. Here, all these carpets that are here, they come from there. So when they escaped from Tibet, the mother knew how to make carpets, and she taught all the children how to make the carpets, and they made by hand so that they could weave these carpets, and so had this showroom of carpets. And then a man named Yurgu, a Greek man, that day went to Setin Gyurme and said, I want to come tomorrow I have friends and they want to buy some carpets. And he said, tomorrow's not good. The showroom's closed because there'll be a ceremony. We're using the showroom. Oh, because there's our family Lama who's coming, and we want to offer a long life puja to him. And Yurgus asked if he could come. He came, and when he saw Lama Ganchen, he was deeply, deeply touched. He started crying, and he went to Lama Ganchen and he said, can you come to Greece? And Lama Ganchen said, no. Why? Well, because you have many masters in the West. He said, no, no, come, 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 come. He said, okay, I'll come, but on one condition. If there are people who are sick and your medical system can't cure them, then I will come. And of course, then a month later, he came. Just a short amount of time before he went to Tsetengurma and he asked for a passport, and 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 Tsetengurma said, why? And he said, no, I need to travel. And then after this, he said, I want a visa for every country in the world. At the time, it wasn't hard to get visas, but it was very expensive. He said, okay, I'll I'll give you the visa for the main European countries and the United States, but you don't know anyone. What are you going to do with these visas? And then so the day he got his passport, the following day he got the invitation from Yurgo to Greece, and this is 1981. And Rinpoche came to the West, and that opened the door. He went from Greece, and there was Giusy Gardeni, who left her body a few years ago. It's this lady from Bologna, who had a tumor, I think, in her liver. And Giusy, the doctors had given her a few months to live. She looked for doctors everywhere, and she she knew Giampagliazzo from the Institute of Pomaglia in Tuscany, and he said, I can't do much, but there is a healing Lama who's now in Nepal, Lama Ganchen Rinpoche. And then Rinpoche gave her Mama Papa pills, the white and the red pills, and pujas and some mantras. I mean, uh, Juzi, who could hardly walk, and a week later she was literally dancing. And she's the first one to invite Rinpoche to Italy. And he said, if you want to live long, you need to live in Nepal. Here in Italy, you'll get sick. And she went to to Kathmandu, and where she lived, and every time she'd come back to Italy, the doctors would tell her she had 3 months to live. But in Nepal, she lived for 26 years. So what if Lama Ganchen hadn't if Lama Ganchen had gone to Gen Lakpala and said, I'm going to do this retreat, if Gen Lakpala had said, great, that's good for you, then he wouldn't have gone to Sikkim. He wouldn't have gone to the long life puja in Kathmandu to meet Yorgus, and then he wouldn't have gone to Greece, and he wouldn't have met Juicy. And so I took a little part of this to tell you the story, also to tell you the story, but just to show you that every small action determines everything that comes after. It's like in an equation. If we have an equation, every number is important, isn't it? It's more than important, it's determining. And in our life, every choice, every thought, every word, every interaction determines the result of our tomorrow. And so that first step in this worldview of Buddha is we live in an impermanent world. It depends on causes and condition, where every action brings a result. And what I live today is the result of the actions that I did in the past that add together with these the conditions of the present, the so-called law of karma. So if someone asks, why is it like this? The Buddhist answer is, because causes and conditions were created for it to be so. When there are causes and conditions, then they then manifest. So every one of our choices and actions of body, speech, and mind direct us. They change our direction. And so there's a profound sense of outer responsibility. So at the very beginning of our path, And excuse me if it seems like a little hard what I'm about to say. This first step that's necessary on a spiritual path is stopping to victimize ourselves. We stop victimizing ourselves means, oh, I'm like this because this one did like that and that one did like that. I would like to be at peace with myself, but given this situation and that situation, the first thing to do is to to take in our own hands and ask ourselves, what can I do to be part of the solution and the reality that I want. It's true that our body influences, our external conditions influence, but our thoughts, our speech, our interactions have a much greater influence. Second seal. Sakche tamche du nelwa. So everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. What does that mean? Let's imagine that we put on rose tainted lenses and we go around. And we go to the mountains. What color's the snow? Pink. So if we put on blue colored lenses, the snow would be blue. What happens is we are not able in any way to experience or perceive anything independently of our own filters, independently of ourselves. So what happens? Whenever I see something or interact with someone or some kind of experience, I live it through all these filters of my physical dispositions, my genetics, my past experiences, my past choices, what I've learned. If I have the filter of sadness, I see the world sad. If I have the filter of resentment, I'm there angry. If I have the filter of abandonment, that, oh, everybody abandons me. If I have the filter of loneliness, I'm always lonely. It doesn't matter who I'm with. We have many filters. Sometimes we give more importance to one or to another. What we live is not what is. It's what we live. I don't know if that's clear the way I've said it. Let me give an example that I've given many times and it'll help us understand this as well. If I ring the singing bowl without philosophizing, I ask you, can you hear the sound of the singing bowl? What's the answer? Yes. If you ask the person next to you, did you hear the singing bowl? What would be the answer? Yes. Another example, can you see me? Ask the person next to you, can you see Lama? What would the answer be? Yes. But now let's philosophize a little bit. What happens when we analyze? I'm ringing the singing bowl. I touch with this piece of wood and onto this bowl of metal, and then creates a vibration in the air that comes to our hearing, our sense faculty of hearing, and our hearing has those micro sensors that perceives those the various frequencies of the vibrations and sends a message to the brain. We receive that signal from our sense consciousness of hearing, and we do a kind of research of our inner database of past experiences, and we say that's a sound of a singing bowl. We unify that. We add the what we see, and we say this is the sound of a singing bowl. So we have the sensory object with the vibrations in the air. We have the sense faculty of hearing, and we have the sense consciousness, that part of the brain that perceives the sound, and then the value that and the label that we give through our discernment, which we call the sound of a singing bowl. Are you following? Now observe well. I play the singing bowl. The first point, so this sensory object, the vibrations in the air, the sound that comes to my hearing and that comes to the hearing of each one of you, is it the same or is it different? Those same waves, do they come to my hearing in the same way they come to your hearing? No, depending on how far we are, how close we are, or where our position. Even those, it hits the ceiling or hits the wall, or if you're listening from home, it comes into the microphone and through the airwaves and through your um, through your computer or whatever. So it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. And let's remember, anything that is the same by definition is different. What about our hearing, our sense faculty? Do we all have the same sense of hearing? It's different. And what about the sense consciousness? Is it the same or different? What about the value attributed to it? The discernment is different. So now I ask you, can you hear the sound that I am hearing? No. When we see someone, what happens? The light touches that person, the body, that form, and then comes to our eyes, our sense faculty of our sight, and sends a message to our the sense consciousness of sight, and we do inner research into the database, and then we give a name, and then that name has a value and with characteristics and memories and other values. So if we philosophize to analyze, and if you ask the person next to you and say, do you see the Lama that I see? What would be the correct answer? No. And when we ask spontaneously, do you see Lama? Actually, we're asking, do you see the Lama that I see? If I ask you, do you hear the singing bowl? What I'm asking you is, do you hear the sound that I hear? Do you hear the sound that I hear? Is that clear? And the correct answer is no. The second seal is to remind us that the filters determine the experience. And as long as those filters are dirty, the experience can't be clean. So as long as I perceive reality through these filters of selfishness, this obsession with self-gratification and anger, aversion, resentment, and attachment, envy, anxiety, jealousy, etc. As long as I live reality through these filters, I will suffer. Sometimes I ask children, have you ever seen a stressed adult? Yes, yeah. Have you ever gone on vacation? Actually, I say, have you ever seen an adult stressed because of work? Yes. And if you go, has it ever happened that you've gone on vacation and that same adult is stressed on vacation? Yes. And I ask, is it because vacation is stressful or that person is stressed? I mean, the answer is clear. So what happens is when we have filters, we live the world through that. We don't have a choice. We can, wherever we go, we can change our house. We can change our partner. We can even change our sex. But as long as our filters are there, we see the world through those. If I have the filter of loneliness, I can be around 1,000 people. I can be in the middle of a world of people who love me and feel alone, feel lonely. So the fundamental point in that second seal is our suffering, and as as a consequence, our happiness, our inner state of being, depends m- mostly on how we live the world. Is that clear? But our tendency is where we believe that our inner sensations are a result of the world in which we find ourselves. And so we're constantly trying to condition, to manipulate the world around us so that the world is how we think it should be. For everything to be fine, we want to avoid what hurts us, and we want to grasp at what we think is good for us, and we're a victim of the world. And so we think that we suffer for three reasons. We think we suffer because we can't have what we want, and not just about the car, or not having what we want means we have an idealized image of how we think should be, of how people should act, how the world should be, and it isn't. So we think that we suffer because we can't have what we want. We think that we suffer because we have to live situations that we don't like. We have to have what we don't want. And the third reason, because we have to be separated from what we do like. If we take our sufferings of the last month, try to remember moments of suffering, try to find a suffering that doesn't fall into one of these three categories. You can't find one. We think we suffer for these three reasons. Because I can't have what I want. Things aren't the way they should be. The person doesn't act in the way he should. It's not doing anything wrong, but not doing what I think he should do. The second reason is because that person is doing something wrong, because something is in a way that bothers me. And the third reason, because beautiful situations that I like, and I need to be separated by my things, by people. Let's analyze quickly this paradigm in which we find ourselves. So one says this is the opposite. It's not true that I suffer because we can't have what we want. In reality, we suffer because we want what we can't have. Let me explain. An example that I've given many times. I like waking up with the morning light. I don't like sleeping with the blinds. In my room, there's an enormous window which I leave open and goes towards the east. So in the morning, the rising sun, the morning sun, I really like that a lot. Let's imagine that I find myself in a house where the window gives to the west, but I like the morning sun, so I want morning sun in my room from the west. So I suffer because I'm suffering because I don't want the sun to rise in the east. I want it to come from the west. What would you tell me? You tell me to change the window, to change the house, or you tell me I'm crazy or stupid. You're suffering for something useless. Why doesn't the sun rise in the west? Because the interactions of all the parts make it so the earth turns in a certain way and the sun comes up from the east. Causes and conditions bring the sun from our east. And every situation that we live in this present moment, starting from an example that's very clear, but if we give also examples that are very banal and small, everything is the way it is because there's a very complex network of interactions that bring it to be like that. So when I suffer because it is not the way I think it should be, I'm suffering because I'm projecting on that reality an idealized image that doesn't correspond. Are you following? I'm not suffering because the sun doesn't come up from the west. I'm suffering because I want the sun to come from the west, when causes and conditions just don't allow it, something that's not possible. And this happens on every level. So it's not true that we can't have what we want. We suffer because we project onto reality something that causes and conditions don't allow for. It's useless to squeeze sand and complain that oil doesn't come out. I can just squeeze it, but oil's not going to come from the sand. The conditions are not there to make oil. And similarly, it's not true that we suffer because we live negative situations that we don't like. We suffer because we don't know how to live those situations that are inevitably there. We don't know how to live them well. And in the third case, it's not true that we suffer because we have to suffer from what we like. The reality is that we suffer because we're not able to perceive and accept impermanence of things. And we see that which is impermanent as permanent. Because in the awareness of impermanence of water, I drink the water, I finish my water, how wonderful that I had this water. I don't need to be upset that I don't have anymore. How wonderful that I could have that water. I've had people that were incredibly important for me who left their body many times, and that I remember that strong emotion at the beginning, and we have this tendency to want to stay sad because that person's not there anymore. Luckily, I've been able to do the opposite process and say, this person has given me so much. And I'm sad because I've received so much from that person. So how wonderful that that person was in my life. And with gratitude, I remember what I received, and with joy, may I keep this memory and all the benefit that I've received within me, without trying to suppress my emotions. But that second seal is when we take the reins in our own hand and we realize that our happiness and our suffering doesn't depend on where I am and with whom I am and what situation I found myself in, but on how I see things, through what filters I have. And as long as I have these filters, I will live reality through these filters. It's an important change in paradigm. The third seal, which is called Chunam Tomshing Dagmepa. We're not going to get into details now, but it's all phenomena are empty and lack self or quickly. When we said before, when we hear a sound or we see someone in our awareness, are we listening to the sound that is and seeing the person that is, or is it what we're perceiving? In our natural way of being, I see someone. What am I seeing? Am I seeing the person I'm seeing, or am I seeing the person that's there? I even how we talk, we don't say, "Oh, you know that person that from my perception it manifests in this way, and to this manifestation I've attributed this value." Or in simple words, reality in which we live, it appears to us as being objective or subjective. How does it appear to us naturally? When we see someone, when we experience a situation, our natural, spontaneous way, are we aware that we're experiencing and living that situation through our filters, or that's the situation? So what happens, just in a few words, we live in a subjective reality that appears to us as if it were objective, and we relate to the subjective that appears as if it were were as if it were as if the subjective reality as if it existed objectively. And Buddha explains that everything exists in an interdependent way. Everything exists exclusively based on the relations that it has, including the relationship with the observer. So we're not able to to perceive anything independently of ourselves. So what I see depends on my filters, not on what you see. And everything, even my perception, depends on the external objects. For example, when I hear the singing bell, my perception of the sound of the singing bowl doesn't exist independently from the filters. If every time, if every in the past, if in the past every time I heard that sound, someone beat me, and now I play this singing bowl, my experience would be very different. So what happens when I hear the sound? It's the sound that I hear that comes to my through my filters, but that perception of the sound doesn't exist independently in my filters and doesn't exist independently from the sound. Without the sound, there wouldn't be everything else. In just a few words, external reality exists, but it doesn't exist independently from an inner reality of each person. And our inner reality exists, but it doesn't exist independently from external reality. And we talk about eternal and external reality are non-dual, and we could spend hours and hours here. But what happens is we live a reality where everything exists exclusively in this network of relationships. It's impossible to see anything and isolate it from the relations. It's like saying that person changes when he's with changes according to the person he's with. Have you seen this? A person is in a certain way when he's with you, and then acts a little differently when he's with someone else. You say, "Oh, that person's not sincere," because when that person's present, that person's different. Of course, that person's different. There's a different interaction. I've never seen someone who's always the same, because none of us exist independently from the relationships that we have in that relations in that moment. And depending on the relation, the comes the change. So an independent, autonomous self, independent of relations, just doesn't exist. Everything exists in within this network of relations, and at the same time, everything exists through everything that we perceive exists for us through our own perception. So we live in a reality that's subjective, interdependent, and one being subjective is one of the levels of interdependence, but it appears to us as if it were objective, autonomous. And this is a form of ignorance. And so what happens, the fact that we live reality as if it were autonomous, objective, we live our own person as being autonomous and objective. And this creates this obsession with self gratification, our selfishness, self-centeredness. We live everything through the I and the my, and this generates attachment, aversion, fear, anger, hatred, etc., and suffering. So this third seal is the fact saying, okay, we live in a subjective reality. We need to learn how to live subjective reality and see it as being subjective. We live in an interdependent reality. We need to learn how to see it as being interdependent. So, without getting into too many details, the fourth point, which is very, very important too, it says Nanyale de pa shiwe. So, which beyond suffering is peace. So nirvana. So nirvana is peace, which means that it is possible to get out of suffering. That fourth seal is each one of us exists as interdependent beings. We're in constant transformation. We've repeated this in every way possible. What does this mean? This means according to my interactions, I transform in one way or another. And if I try to create a healthy interaction, then I'm going to create a healthy state. And so it is possible to diminish the negative mental defilements, hatred and envy and anxiety, selfishness and ignorance. So, but what's the limit? I mean, how much anger can we remove? Is there a limit? There's no limit. And even developing our inner qualities, love, compassion, gratitude, generosity, what's the limit of love? The three people, that's as many as you can love. Is there a limit to how many you can love? And then after that number, you need to take away somebody to love someone else? Or is it limitless? When love means love is that feeling of that sincere and deep desire for the happiness and joy of someone else. So there's no limit. That shows us that we can clean these filters, and we can also develop all the characteristics that are good for us. Understanding what is detrimental and what is positive. You can even just see our body when those feelings are present. When someone gets angry, for example, or feels anxiety or jealousy or envy, how does our body react? Is it relaxed, feels good, or tense? The body is not well. Even from a health perspective, someone who's always angry, the body gets sick. And when someone feels love instead, gratitude, compassion, how does the body react? The body feels good. Actually, food is tastier when you feel love, and that's not something. I mean, that's something physical, because when we feel love, our oxytocin increases, and our oxytocin increases the sensitivity of our senses. So the colors are more vivid and the sounds are more softer and beautiful, and the food is tastier. So food cooked with love is tastier. Even if we cooked with the same ingredients, because when there's love and one perceives that, one generates a feeling of affection. There's a chemical part of our body that increases oxytocin, and then our senses perceive things differently. So what happens? So these virtuous behavior, so-called virtuous behavior, those are Those are attitudes that when they're present, the body is well. I mean, do you feel better when you're agitated or calm? A calm body. And we can go on with other examples, but I leave you to reflect on it. But the key is that we can all do it. There's no one who doesn't have the necessary resources to reach a state of peace and joy and balance. And in the life of Buddha, there are many examples, like Gunilama. He was a boy who, at a certain point, his parents were killed, um, and he thought that his parents were in a great suffering, and he said, um, um, no, his parents had died, and he was frightened that his parents were in a state of great suffering. And so a spirit came to him and said, to make sure that your parents have a good rebirth, you need to kill 1,000 people and 1,000 beings. 1,000 person, and for every person he killed, he would cut off a finger, and he was wearing this necklace of fingers. And one day in the woods, he saw Buddha. He had killed 999, and then he saw Buddha, and he said, "Here, my 1,000th person." And it doesn't seem he wasn't walking quickly. It'll be easy to catch him. And he goes towards Buddha, and then he runs to catch him. And the story says that as the more he ran, um, the farther apart they were. I mean, he could never get to him. At a certain point, he was desperate, and he said, "Stop, stop!" And Buddha stopped, and he looked at me. And he said, "But I am stopped. The one who's always running is you." And he said, saying, "I'm already outside of the cycle of suffering, but you are the one who is putting more and more movement in this cycle of samsara." And just making a long story short, Buddha helps him understand that what he was doing was not the right thing, and he was hurting himself more than helping himself. And he recognizes that what he did was wrong, and he starts following a different lifestyle, completely inverting his behavior. It's said that even the practice of healing through the hands comes also through him. It's said that one day Buddha was together with Guni Lamala, and there was a lady who was going to give birth, and she was in tremendous pain and asked for help from Lord Buddha. And instead of Buddha giving the blessing himself to the woman, he said to Gunilamala to give it, and he said, "There's nobody worse than me. What kind of blessing do you think I can give this woman?" He said, "No, put your hands on there and say, for the power of the truth, if it's true that I killed so many people guided by my own ignorance, and that today I've recognized that that was a mistake and I've changed my life. If this is real, may this lady be healed." And doing like that, it's said that that lady's pain subsided. And at the time of Buddha's, there was this evoking the power of truth, that brought special results. And Gunilamala reached a state of balance and was able to get out of his suffering. And one day, it doesn't end. So he went to beg for food, as food in a village, and they recognized him as the one who had killed so many, and they beat him to death. But he, 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 as so they beat him almost to death. They beat him to death, but before dying, it's said that he really reached a high level of peace, and that he said that he realizes that this was a result of what he had done, and that um, he had he had he was totally at peace with himself for what he how he managed to change. So, and there are many other examples. So we can all make it. I don't think there's anybody here who's killed 999 people. I mean, we have the real tools to reach this state of balance and joy. It really depends on how we live our day, our life every day. So the 4 points, things are important, things are impermanent. So everything brings a result, every action brings a result, and we should we should act accordingly, according to the results that we want to have. Number 2, as long as our filters are dirty, we're going to see the world as being dirty. So we need to work on our emotions, on our traumas, on what we have inside, not just changing the world around us, not at all. And then this, instead, the world reality is um, the world lacks what we call inherent existence, and so what appears as being objective is subjective, and we need to learn to live according to that too. There's some simple things that can help. For example, stop saying "you said this." We don't know, or we don't know really what someone said. We can say, I understood this. Or, and even to say, I said this. No, I wanted to say this, or I meant to say this. Something, I got, I got stopped at the border in Canada recently, and they opened up my suitcases, everything like this, and and they asked me what, but the people, because he was bringing offerings, but didn't they tell you? And it helped me when I just said, I understood this. This is what I understood. So also we can avoid saying, this is like that. This seems like this. My perception is this. It's very different than saying, this is like this, or you said this. These are 2 very simple examples, but can really help us with this 3rd point that is fundamental. The 3rd point, which is fundamental, which is having a correct view of reality. And then the 4th seal is about believing in ourselves, that we can all make it, each one of us. These are 4 important aspects of the view of Buddhism. And if we were to summarize, Buddhist view, it talks about the law of karma. So so how we are inside determines how we live external reality, and everything is subjective and interdependent. Nothing exists independently from its relations, and we can't isolate and change one thing without taking care of all the rest, the whole other network. And the 4th point, we all have the potential to reach this state of peace. And here is now the whole world opens up, that has to do with the conduct and the techniques of familiarization or meditation. Conduct means, what do I do to be happy, to be well? And can be summarized in 2 main aspects. I love myself and love others. But let's remember that we are not able to love others if we can't first love ourselves. And it all starts there. And loving oneself, it just in a few words means, I mean, are we selfish or not? Don't be afraid. We're selfish, aren't we? I mean, we give priority to the I and the my. I do. We are. If we're selfish, let's try at least to do it well. So the first part of contact is to be a selfish person, a healthy selfish person. He or she who recognize what is good for them and puts energy into cultivate it, even if it's difficult, and recognizes what's detrimental, and even if it's pleasurable, puts effort into avoiding that thing. So I cultivate what's good for me and I abandon what's bad for me. That first path, the first step is becoming a healthy, um, selfish person. Love oneself. The second step is about becoming, we can say, a mature selfish person. It's when I understand that, selfishly speaking, it's better to be altruistic. When I'm able to experience how pleasurable it is, and then naturally, little by little, it expands and includes others. And more, we transcend that obsession of self and we include others. And that's the second step, this development of love and compassion, the so-called bodhicitta. But that requires something more. This state where not only do I include others, but I take the responsibility on myself to help others. And the third part of conduct is developing a correct view of reality, and to uphold all of that, we try to train in our everyday life in love and compassion at the basis, and in generosity and morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. These a Buddhist behavior, if we want to call it like that, is based on love towards oneself and love towards others, and on conduct where one trains in their daily life. I'm trying to generate more and more generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. And within that, there are some small, basic rules that can help us. So if you want to be well, you have to stop doing what's bad for you, what's harmful to you. So what are the 5 things that we should stop doing? Killing, stealing, lying, taking substances that disturb our mental clarity, drugs and alcohol, and we should avoid any kind of sexual misconduct. The first 3 are self-explanatory. You can take the life of another being, take what has not been given to you, use the words or writing so that people have a perception that is different from what you know to be the truth. Take substances that take away mental clarity. Alcohol, for example. One says, does one glass does one glass of wine count, or do we need to get to three glasses of wine? But I mean, the reality is one glass brings to the second glass turns to the third. There's also here at the center the the chief police officer came, and he said, "But here at the center, do you use alcohol?" And I said, "No." I said, "Oh, oh, thank goodness, because normally most of the work that I do revolves around there's always alcohol at the root, like um, 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 so alcohol and drugs should be avoided, especially if you want to have control over yourself. And sexual misconduct, there are different interpretations. I'll give you my own. There are two levels of sexual misconduct. The first level has to do with a commitment with another person. This means if I have a commitment with someone, and if I break that commitment, having relations with someone else, that is sexual misconduct. Just ask, is it something you can talk about openly? If you have to hide it, then there's something has been broken. Sometimes someone says, "Oh, but the other one, if the other one doesn't know, then I'm not hurting the other." Um, but it's not true that nothing happens, because what happens when we have a commitment, the reciprocal commitment, when it's broken, there's something deep inside that is broken and is very difficult to repair, and then that it changes something and kind of makes a kind of domino effect on other aspects. So the first level of sexual misconduct has to do with reciprocal commitment. The second level is a little deeper. Sexual misconduct would be where there's missing the respect towards the will and desire of someone else, or a relationship. Within a relationship, the other person is not taken into consideration, but is simply used to benefit the one's own desires. Um, it's said that like the lack of consideration for the dignity of the other person. You see someone only as an instrument for my pleasure, and I don't see that other person in his dignity and whatever. So to have a correct sexual conduct means that we need to maintain and keep our commitments. You can also give up your commitments. I remember a friend, I saw this. It was incredibly mature what he did. He was married, and at a certain point he fell in love with another woman. He was crazy about this person. He was not able to live without this person. And so he wasn't able to, and he said to then he went to his wife and he said, "I've fallen in love. I haven't done anything about it, but I'm in love." So what happened was, he said, "I'm not able to do differently. Let's break up, and I'm going to go see if this works with this other person." They broke up, moved out, etc. And then he went to see if it could work with this person. It worked a little bit, and then it didn't work in the long term. But instead of trying to see how it was with her, and then I'll tell my wife, no. So he was correct. He maintained his commitment and respect your partner. So the conduct of these originally 5 vows, if you do the opposite, it will hurt you. That's the point. It's harmful. And then there are others, have to do with, complaining or criticizing, using our speech violently. I mean, We should try to avoid all of those, not because you can't do them, but because these are the things that just they bring suffering. And the last part, which has to do with meditation, has to do with learning tools that help us trains in generating states that are not yet spontaneous, but we want them to be like I want to train in generosity, train in compassion, train in love. So through meditation, I induce these thoughts. So what you brought here today, I don't know, but we're here together, and I don't think that any of you have come here because you have some mundane benefit. If we lived in a Buddhist society world, and and on Sunday we go and talk to the Lama, then we feel good about coming. Here, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you have to justify why you've come to a Buddhist center. Um, so we're not. Nobody is going to make anything. Is going to benefit from this externally. I mean, we're here because we want to be well with ourselves and others, and there are tools that will help us in that direction. So I invite each one of you to you mean to think about this, and you don't have to be Buddhist. That's not important for me. But what's important is that we put effort with awareness into becoming a person that is more balanced, more loving, more peaceful, more joyous. So I invite you to reflect on your own worldview, your own conduct, and how much you dedicate to reaching these to the goals that you have. So now it's time for lunch. After lunch, there will be this moment called the taking of refuge. Everyone is welcome to come to actually take refuge. If you don't know what it is, it means that it's not time yet. One should wait 3-4 years, and once you've really understood what it is. Originally, it was 12 years one should wait, but I mean, to say that there's no hurry, it's where when one formalizes that you will follow a certain inner path from a certain lineage of a spiritual tradition. And when you take this commitment, when you say, I want to apply and follow these teachings in every aspects of my life, but it needs to be sincere and deep, and there's no hurry. So those who have done this, who've already done it, taken this commitment, you can renew it. And if you want, if you're just curious, you can come as well. So now it's time for lunch. It's time for our dedications, and I'd like to also thank all of you for being here. With this, your heart is open and your mind that is attentive.
Losan tempe drume sasumki drove munsel taktu ne gyur che kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheke pela longche ching sadan lamge yente rabzone dorje change kopan yurtoba sho nimo dele tsindele Nime kuyan delek shin ninsen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lobo kuncho sumke ngodrubo tsol kuncho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Have a good lunch. Thank you very much.